If you've never had a cop randomly stop you on the street and ask you where you're headed, then it's hard for you to imagine just how scary that can be. Tonight, we're talking about the controversial police policy known as stop and frisk. Random stops were supposed to end back in 2013 after a federal court ruled them indirect racial profiling. And despite that ruling, take a look at what was just recently happened on the streets of New York City.
Why y'all do this? I do this every day, bro. You're not gonna find nothing because they don't do nothing.
The damn jump out boys. If that isn't harassment, as you saw Copley simply walk away and don't find anything legal, they just leave. The guys in the video claim this kind of BS happens daily. And now the man who made all of this worse in the first place, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, is on his I Am So Sorry tour with black groups since he's considering a late run for president. Bloomberg saying he didn't realize the impact it was having on black and brown communities, even though we told him about it back then. Well, here I'll show you the impact. Under Bloomberg, half of the people stopped were black and a third were Latino, and half were ages 14 to 24, despite that age group making up a small fraction of the population. And this year, the amount of black people stopped and frisked by cops has gone up 60%. And get this, of those 60%, police found no weapons on 93% of them. Here to offer up their opinions is retired HPD Sergeant Kenneth Perkins, Precinct 7 Captain Holland Jones here in Harris County, Texas, and civil rights attorney here in Houston, Texas, Sadia Evangelista. Glad to have you here on The Factor Uncensored. First of all, did we ever have a policy like that here in Houston?
No, not that I'm aware of.
We ain't that damn crazy.
No, no.
But when you see a situation like this still happening, stop and frisk in New York City when it has been ruled unconstitutional.
Well, it's very mind-boggling, first of all. Then it's like they don't care anything about the amendments that's in place. We have the 4th Amendment, we have the 5th Amendment, we have the 14th Amendment. It seems like they just totally disregard that. Now, I blame that on the mayor and some of the people that's in office for not, getting with these police officers because they know that's wrong. This is definitely unconstitutional and a violation of law.
There were major protests in New York City when this first came out, so he can't say now he didn't know how harmful it would be now that he wants to run for president, that being Michael Bloomberg.
Right. He was a staunch supporter of stop and frisk. So now for him to turn over, well, we know he's bipolar because he first was a Republican, then he was an independent. Now he's a Democrat. And the first thing that he does is he goes to the black churches to try to garner support and apologize this fake apology. Now, if you were sincere, then you would, he's worth, what, $54 billion? Give them, the families, reparation. Eric Garner, his family has lost a loved one, lost him. And it was a stop and frisk. So when you come to us with this half-hearted apology, but you institutionalize and sanction police terrorism, that still the community feels the effect. And let me say this about Houston. When you look at Houston, it's 2.3 million people in the city of Houston, and you look at 12% of the population is African-American, and 36% of blacks get stopped, then we can't talk about New York without talking about Houston as well.
All right, Captain Jones, let's bring you into this conversation. How harmful and are there long-term lasting effects for those who are stopped and checked by officers without any real reason to do so?
Well, I think what we need to do first is look at the organizational history of the stop and frisk. It came from Terry v. Ohio. And what the United States Supreme Court said is that a police officer may stop you and frisk you if they reasonably believe that you are armed and dangerous.
But what we've seen is random stops based on race.
Exactly. And so when you have this hyper-vigilant police surveillance of minorities, what you have is disproportionate minority contact, which leads to disproportionate minority confinement. So yes, it's a long-term impact to minorities altogether. But I also want to bring something to your attention. In 8 years, they stopped 4.4 million individuals under this stop and frisk policy. And 52% of those were African American, and they only found weapons 1.5% of the time. It's ridiculous, it's injurious, and they did this under the auspices of an anti-gun campaign, so which allowed them to engage in factual and facial racial discrimination and racial profiling.
Now, Sadia, what we've seen here in Houston in the past is individuals complaining about the so-called jump out boys.
Yes.
For those who are not familiar with that here in Houston, explain that and how detrimental that was on the community.
Well, the jump out boys just had a carte blanche opportunity to just freely stop and racially profile individuals. And this, you know, this is very traumatic for individuals who have not committed any particular type of crime. And, you know, by law, the police departments in Texas have to report the racial profiling. And what you find is that although we see that there is a pattern of racial profiling, we see hardly any grievances filed on these police officers. So therefore, the people who are being victimized cannot really get justice because they fear for their life because of the jump out boys.
Now, when many of us are approached by police officers today and we don't know what the circumstances may be, whether it's warranted or not, what do you have to do? What are you required under law to do? We know what you need to do to stay the damn alive, but what are you required under law to do if a police officer says, I want to stop you, I want to talk to you?
Well, first of all, if you want to live, be just as cordial and polite as you possibly can.
But that still doesn't work.
Well,
and we've seen that.
Yeah, it doesn't work. But at least it gives you an opportunity to make it to the next day. Hopefully,
if they ask for ID, show your ID.
Show your
cooperate.
ID. Yeah, just kind
you
of
might still end up dead, but you never know. Do your best you can to stay alive.